See, it always tells me past due. I hit the button before it's past due. There we go. So welcome everyone who is watching the recording. We'll see if we get anyone on live pretty quick with the upcoming thing. I think that kind of helps people. Yep, we already got someone. So welcome, whoever it is. As far as the beginning of the class goes, you're Andy Haskell. Whether you are or not, you're the honorary Andy Haskell. So whoever is here, great. Also, all those who are here in person, wonderful to have you. Before we start at all today, yesterday I was on a phone call with Ken, whose last name starts with an O, but I'm not going to try to pronounce it without looking at all the letters. It's not. I know it's not that hard of a name, but Ken is the representative from Concordia Publishing House, who is, I don't know what his position is, but he's basically the point person or the contact person for the field test of this study, what we're doing. So I had the pleasure of talking him through all of my thoughts on the study, which, you know, he kept apologizing because we did slightly run over time, and first of all I said, you have no idea who I am. And then on the other hand, I said, I will talk about my feelings on things for as long as you want, right? The reason I'm mentioning this is because he was very excited about the idea of getting any of your feedback. And he will be sending out surveys, so there's things to fill out that I'll give to any of you. And if you are interested in filling out those surveys, they would greatly appreciate that. But in addition to that, if you would like to get on the phone with Ken and tell him what you think about this study, you can't tell him what you think about me because he's not reviewing me, right? But if you want to get on the phone, tell him, hey, this is what I like, this is what I don't. He'll ask you questions. One of the questions he asked me, which I'll mention to you because I think, right, it's something of a running joke around here. He asked me if I was troubled by the fact that the book has no Bible passages in it. And I said, I'll be honest, I didn't even notice. And I said, they have the citations. I got a Bible with me when I'm teaching it anyway. But they'll ask questions like that. What do you think of, and this will be real helpful for all of you, right? What do you think of all these group discussion questions that I don't ask you? But I told him I'm either the best person or the worst person to do this study because I don't follow studies well. Although there's a decent chance that he's going to watch this because I did send him the playlist. Now, I doubt he's going to watch through all the many, many hours. But Ken, if you're watching, hello. Who knows? Maybe Ken is one of our 2 viewers at the moment. It would be a joy to have you if it were. It's a long way of saying, if you are interested in giving more specific and detailed feedback, let me know, and I'll get you in contact. It's really easy to set up. You'll just do it online, give him a phone number and a time, and then he gives you a call, and it's about a half hour or so that he was talking to me at least. So if you're interested in that, let me know after the class. That also goes for those of you watching online. And in fact, I'm sure he would love to hear from someone who's not actually in the classroom as well, feedback, right? Like I said, this is a pilot, not only for this book, or this workbook study, whatever you want to call it, but it is also a pilot for a potential series of these kinds of studies. So,
what's unique about it?
They are, and this is one of the things that I personally really like about this study, is, so how many of you know, if I say the big blue commentaries, how many of you know what I'm talking about? I know you will. So if you look in my office, they're on the middle, actually they're right in the middle of my bookcase. I got a big stack of books. The Revelation one's like 400 pages. It's the one I'll bring in from time to time. It's what I base all my classes here on. The big blue academic commentaries that Concordia puts out, which are fantastic resources, but there's huge chunks of Greek and grammar analysis and these sorts of things. What this study is doing, and this is the pilot for the larger potential study, is taking those big blue commentaries and turning them into something that can be used in a Bible study, small group, personal devotion sort of system. Personally, I'll tell you my opinion, which will skew the results. I think it's a fantastic thing. Brighton's Revelation commentary is not difficult to read as far as those commentaries go. He can get in the weeds with language just like any of these guys, but it's not like some of the other commentaries in the series, which I've enjoyed, right? I spend my own personal money purchasing these books because I think they're valuable, but they can get really dry and they can get really hard to get through at times because they're meant for an academic. They're meant to be used like at seminary level and in classrooms and that kind of thing. They're tremendous resources, which is why I use them when I teach classes. But that's what this Bible study, in theory, is intending to make what is a fairly expensive, academic, potentially dry book into something easily digestible, useful, and accessible to a lay audience. And don't get me wrong, right? I think we can miss the point when I say, the lay audience. This is not to say that, trust me, I understand some of you are more intelligent than I am. Most of you probably are. And we have very intelligent people here, but you're in different fields, right? So this is just helpful in that sense.
Are there other congregations doing this stuff?
Yes, I wanted to say, he told me, I want to say there's about 70 congregations that they have. That number might be high. I was talking with one of my classmates at the district conference, and I said, I'm field testing this Revelation study. He said, I'm field testing a Revelation study. So
Was it the same?
it was the same one. Yeah, I'm much further ahead than he is. He was only on the second lesson at that point. No, so we are not the only congregation. And quite frankly, depending on how they answered Pastor Jordan's email, every circuit or every congregation in our circuit was invited to participate. I think we're the only one in our circuit that took them up on that, and that's mostly because y'all have been pestering me to do Revelation for how long have I been here? 5 years. In fact, Pastor Jordan mentioned this to me. He had just gotten an email. I walked into his office and he said, I got this email, and I kind of rolled my eyes and I said, I guess I'm doing Revelation this year, aren't I? Because it was the week that I was putting my schedule together. So providence and all of that. Any other thoughts or questions on what this study is? Because we talked about it 7 lessons ago. It was 2 months ago. We talked about it briefly. By the way, and I'm sure they would be happy for me to remind you, if you see any grammar or spelling mistakes, that's why. Because this is not the final copy. This is still in the editing process. We're near the end, but not quite there. So. All right, well, with that out of the way, are there any lingering questions, comments, concerns from the previous weeks that you would like to bring up at this point? All right. Well, then we will continue on. So last week, we in many ways concluded, well, not entirely, but we concluded the primary cyclical portion of the book of Revelation, right? So the book of Revelation is kind of centered on that picture of the Lamb ascending into the throne room and taking his seat, right? Chapters 4 and 5 there. And then from that centerpiece, and if I remembered to grab a pen or a marker or an eraser, I would start drawing this. I will get back to this picture I'm trying to put together for you at some point before we're done. And we're running out of lessons, so it'll be soon. But from that nexus point, John spirals out, or this vision spirals out from there. First, we see the 7 seals being broken. Again, that kind of from the ascension to the return of Christ. And then that picture of, right, which we're going to read this Sunday, right? It's the All Saints' Day reading, the vision of, well, we skip over the 144,000 part because making someone read 12,000 from Asher, 12,000, it just gets a little tedious on a Sunday morning, right? But that vision of the host arrayed in white, as it were, standing before the Lamb. And then The vision resets with the seventh seal, and we have those 7 trumpets blasting. From there, skipping the interlude, we have that what we covered last week, the 7-fold censures, right? In which we see in all 3 of these different aspects of the suffering and the judgment and the things that will be afflicting the world and the church from that time of the ascension to the return of Christ. And we used that, which I think, Bill, you asked the question that brought it up, but that idea of Disney, early Disney animations with the different panes, where we're now getting to see, there are different panes, although in our day-to-day life we may not know which one's which, right? But we're seeing kind of behind the scenes. I'll go over it with you in a minute here.
How do you spell the word panes that you're using?
P-A-N-E-S.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. It's a good image, so we'll go over it briefly here. So Disney and early animation, right? So they would take foreground imagery, focal, I don't know the words for this, and then background.
Like the window pane.
And they put them on, different panes of glass, and they put a camera in from the top. That's how they created depth, and they could do different things with that. That is what we tend to see, right? Is this kind of, we see the Disney film as it's finished. What Revelation is doing is it's taking us behind the scenes and saying, here is all the ways that man causes suffering. Here's judgment that God has upon everyone. Here's judgment that God sends upon the wicked, right? We can't always tell the difference. In fact, normally we can't tell the difference, but we're given this vision that it does exist, right? From here, so starting with today, we're really beginning the conclusion of the book of Revelation. Right, so our first couple of lessons were that ramp up with that initial vision of John and the 7 letters to the 7 churches. Starting with 17, we're going to begin to conclude. So as events progress, we're going to back up a little bit here and there, rewind and look at different things. So like today we're going to look at, I love this title, right? Because it's like construct chain on top of construct chain. But the judgment and overthrow of the forces of Satan. Right? So all the henchmen. So really, Beast 1 and Beast 2, look, it's still helpful. Beast 1 and Beast 2, we're going to see them overthrown and judged today. Next week, we're going to see actually, I don't know if it's next week, but in a future lesson, we're going to see the overthrow of the dragon. So we're going to see the overthrow of Satan. So that's kind of happening in a similar time frame, but we're focusing on different things. And then finally, of course, with the total conclusion of the vision in Revelation, we'll see the new city, the new heavens and the new earth, eternal life. We'll get just a brief glimpse into the eternity that awaits the saints after final judgment. And then Revelation itself concludes with John threatening everybody, right? Because he's an early church guy, and they just threaten people a lot, I guess. But no, John basically says, don't change this vision. Right? And we can apply that to the whole Bible, but that's something we'll get to as we get there. Questions on this kind of overview before we dive into today's lesson? So today we are technically covering chapters 17 and 18. We will see again one of these rewind sections. 17 and 18 cover basically the same event, one in prose and one in poetry. So the first time is just a description, and the second is covering basically the same history, the same events, but it's in the form of a poem or a song. And so we'll cover 18 in part, but 18 is a very long chapter, and so we're not going to go into all the details there. But basically what happens is we're going to see as the beasts are overthrown, and then kind of we have talking about it, right? How many of you have ever read Dracula? Right, the book, it's about that thick.
Is that Mary Shelley?
No, that's Frankenstein, Bram Stoker's thing, right? He was escaping me too. So I read Dracula, and I enjoyed Dracula as much as I could. But my one gripe with Dracula is, if you haven't read it, don't worry, I'm not ruining any plot points. The basic structure of the book goes like this. A thing occurs. A group of people talk about what has just happened. Right? So we see the event, then we see people talking about it, and then in the case of Dracula, they then talk about what they're going to do next, and then they do that thing, and then they talk about what just happened, and then they talk about what they're going to do. So basically, Bram Stoker says there are 3 versions of Dracula in the book. There's the looking back, the actual events, and then the looking forward portion. That's a little overstated, but that's kind of what's happening here, right? So we have this, here's this narrative event, the overthrow of the beast and the harlot, and then we're looking back in the kind of celebration of the overthrow sort of thing. Does that kind of make sense in the kind of the structure here? All right, good. There are a few things in the overview that I wanted to kind of highlight here as we kind of drive into the text for today. And again, these are, I think, I've noticed that I have boxes with a big, bold leader on the side, which implies to me that you don't have these. So I don't think I actually need to keep guessing as to what you do and don't have. Which is not a fault of the printing, it's a fault of me not looking at the side of the page. So under their themes section for the overview section here, it concludes with this. Key to this lesson will be the identification of the ways that the false prophets and the fallen culture work not only to sway and distract the world, but to destroy the church. In the end, these forces are destroyed. So there's a couple of things that we're going to look at. Throughout the entirety of this chapter, these chapters, we're going to note that the motivation of our antagonist, if you want to take literary terms, is going to be undermining and destroying the church. Right? This is a continuation of the interlude. So we saw that the interlude began right with the Christmas story and the whole life of Christ, right? And the woman fleeing into the desert where God will protect her. And yet the dragon does everything it can to destroy the woman. Right? Do we remember what that woman was representative of?
Was it
the church?
The church, right. At least it's... The church! Look at that. Right. This woman is representative of the church. And we're gonna see some parallelisms, especially in this chapter. And of course, we also saw during the interlude that because the dragon can't get the woman, it goes after the woman's children, which are the people of the church, right? The members of the church. And of course, ultimately, the dragon will fail even in that endeavor. But we see today that the attacks of the beasts, which are the agents of the dragon, the agents of Satan, are going to be for that purpose, to undermine and to destroy the church. And so that is the motivation of our antagonists. But we also need to remember that they will fail, right? They will be unsuccessful. It might not always look that way, and again, that's been a major theme of the book in general, but the assaults against the church will not succeed. Right?
But it's going to be ugly nonetheless.
Yes, ugly is correct. There's also, and I haven't pointed these out to you, I think I have once or twice. In the back of your lesson is an excursus.
What's that word mean?
Excursus means Brighton wanted to talk about something that wasn't relevant enough for him to talk about in the commentary. So it's an aside.
A PS.
Kind of, yeah. And they've included these throughout the lessons. I'm going to point this one out. We're not going to go through it in detail. If we want to deal with this question, we can as we get there. But I would like to commend it to you. I think this is a particularly useful excursus, especially because we just went through the John's epistles, right? And so the title of the excursus is the harlot the Antichrist? And so Brighton we're going to get to her. She's not quite appeared yet. But is the harlot of chapter 17 and 18, is she the Antichrist? And Brighton kind of works through what that word means, the fact that word isn't in the book of Revelation, and yet is the thought there. So we may or may not come back, and I might reference that. I got 2 underlines in here, but I would commend that to you for your own reading going forward, especially if you're curious.
Are we going to talk about her?
We are going to talk about her.
All right. Can I guess what I think it is?
Sure.
Yes and no.
It's almost like you've taken a class with me before.
Because Antichrist is anything against Christ. She obviously
right.
She's
Okay.
engaged in prostitution. You're going against Christ.
Yes.
Is she the? Probably not. The?
And so good answer, right? In fact, that's a lot shorter version of what Brighton wrote. But
Sorry.
no, this is good. This is good. It is interesting that you brought up the prostitution thing. We're going to have to talk about that and why is this woman a harlot, right? Because remember, this is not a literal prostitute who is appearing. This is a representation, right? And we will talk about why is this character, I'm just leaving things vague for right now, why is it a prostitute and not someone else or something else, right? Why is it not someone who works for the IRS? Or why is it not whatever it may be? I think we'd all be far more confident if it was an IRS worker. It would definitely be the Antichrist, right?
A lot of them are.
So why don't we dive into the actual text here? So can I have a volunteer to read? They want us to do 1 through 6, and that's a paragraph, so that works for me. Thank you, Jeff.
All right. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute, who sits by many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead was a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes, and of the abominations of the earth. I saw the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished."
All right. So we have one of the more dramatic, I think, images in Revelation, right? So this is interesting insofar as the harlot, the prostitute, kind of comes a little bit out of nowhere. It just appears as if we have already met this character, met this individual, and as it turns out, at least according to Brighton, I think it's correct here, we have. And so I've referenced before. So in the interlude, we saw this unholy trinity, right? The 666 thing here. So you got the dragon, who is Satan, right? Real easy for that one. Then we had the first beast and the second beast. And the beasts are described the first beast is described in various ways, and the first beast is very consistent. We still have these blasphemous names and all of that. And the first beast is this beast that the prostitute is riding. This is that first beast. This is as we said, political beast. This is the tyranny and the political systems in which Satan uses to undermine and to destroy the church, to get people to worship, right? Anything but God, that sort of thing. And we see that beast here. And so that's easy, right? And what we'll note is that the political beast is a consistent image throughout the book. The second beast, however, changes. First it's a beast, then it's a prophet, and now we'll see in chapter 17 that this religious beast, this prophet, is now a harlot, which might seem like a strange jump from prophet to prostitute. But we're going to talk about why it's a pretty natural progression and what is going on there. And again, why that particular profession is chosen as opposed to other ones for this vision.
That's the oldest one.
Well, there's a How I Met Your Mother joke about fishermen. But anyway, we'll leave that there. Well, okay. Well, let's stop just alluding to that. So we note here, as Jeff read for us, right? We have a prostitute. We all know what they do, and we have verse 2, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality. You had a slightly different translation, adultery, right? On which the dwellers of the earth have become drunk. We go further on, right? Holding in her hand, this is the second half of verse 4. Holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her adultery or sexual immorality. So, why is, from a biblical perspective, why does this religious beast, right? Again, this is the false religions of the world that are trying to undermine allies with the political beast, all that kind of stuff. Trying to undermine the church. Why does this beast become a prostitute, become a harlot?
It's kind of like how the rail at this other church I go to will let anybody go there and take communion.
Okay.
And I refer to them as being slutty.
No, that's not the. So we got to look Old Testament here, and there's a complaint that God makes constantly against the Israelites. One of the minor prophets.
Is it chasing false gods?
Yes,
Okay.
that's what it is. But now I need to remember who it is.
Okay.
I don't think it's Habakkuk. Anyway. Jill, thank you for showing up at just the right time. Because I am drawing a blank. The minor prophet who was commanded by God to marry a prostitute. Hosea, thank you. Right. Why is he commanded to marry a prostitute? Again, these are action prophecies, right? So Hosea is representative of God in this particular case. The prophets are the mouthpiece of God. And who is Gomer? Gomer. Ooh. Look at that. See, I remember Gomer, but anyway. Who is Gomer representative of?
People. Yeah.
Specifically,
Israel.
the Israelites.
Oh.
Why? Well, because we got to go back to Sinai even for the origins of this this image, right? On Sinai, and again, this is kind of a metaphorical way of looking at what happens. You can view, and this is something that professors at seminary love writing papers about because they get really excited about this, right? Trying to draw correlations between the covenant in Sinai and a wedding festival in the early Old Testament times. And it's there, again, just throw a rock at an Old Testament professor and he's written a paper on it. Because like I said, they really like this kind of thing. But on Mount Sinai, right, God marries himself to the people of Israel, right? And this is the same image, right, that we have up here. This is, the church is the bride of Christ. Israel is the bride of Christ, and the church and Israel are the same thing from the biblical perspective, right? Right. So when we have Israel here, we are not talking about the geographic location. We're not talking about the people who live in that geographic location. We are talking about the people who trust in the promises made to Abraham, right? And on Mount Sinai, God marries himself to his people, to the Israelites. And then what do?
Cheat on it.
They cheat. Well, that's the nicer way of putting it, right? The way the prophets put it is they whore after the nations, right? Which might be why Gomer is named Gomer. Right? Isn't Gomer close to nation? Or am I? Yes.
Goyim.
Yeah, Goyim and Gomer. Anyway, I'm not teaching Hosea, which is obvious because I cannot remember the name of the book. But the prophets identify that the people of Israel have been whoring themselves, have been prostituting themselves out to the other nations, to the other gods of those nations. They are cheating on the one true God with the false idols, right? This is the predominant image for idolatry in the Old Testament is marital unfaithfulness, prostitution, right? Which is also a literal image. I think we've talked a little bit about this, but most of the Near East Old Testament era religions involved cult prostitution. So it was not only a figurative, but it also in many cases was a literal thing that was happening, right? So in the Bible, idolatry is equated with prostitution, with harlotry, to use our Revelation term, right? Hosea makes this point very clearly, and Hosea has to go redeem Gomer 3 times or something. Well, it's a great book. It really is. It's also not what I'm teaching this year.
You have 2 kids, also.
Right, yes.
Which have terrible.
No, not that. Next time is Joel. Joel's the next book we're doing. Which, by the way, for what it's worth, Ken, the guy from CPH, knew why I was doing Joel, because that was the most recent commentary to come out. Which isn't true anymore. I think Isaiah is out.
Middle Isaiah.
Yeah, middle Isaiah is either out or about to come out. But that's neither here nor there, because I don't have that one yet. Anyway, so we're doing Joel next. But in the Old Testament, harlotry and prostitution is connected, at least in imagery, with idolatry, false religion. And so that's the first reason why this religious beast becomes a harlot. Right? It's kind of transformed into this image of the harlot, is because, that's what its goal is. Right? The goal of the religious beast is to draw the people of God out into sexual immoralities, as our translation here uses it, right? And so that's what it's parading in its cup, right? In its fineries. It's the name written on its forehead, right? Is that it is the false religion that has drawn so many saints away, right? Why else? There's one other reason, and it's the secondary reason why. I don't know if it's secondary. We'll just say it's less of an Old Testament image. That this religious beast becomes a harlot. Any ideas? This is contained within the book of Revelation. So you have all the information you need.
Why it turns into that?
Right. So why it turns into...
The beast becomes a
why does the religious beast transform into an adulterous woman?
You don't know, saying, man.
Well, are there any other women in the book of Revelation?
Mary.
Right, there's this woman image, which is in the narrow sense Mary, in the large sense the church, right? And so, what is the goal of the religious beast?
To replace,
There we go. And as we see in this final form of the religious beast, not only is it saying things to draw people away, not only is it pointing towards the other henchmen of the devil, but now it's going to imitate the church, right? So now we have 2 women, right? And they represent the true faith and false belief, right? And so they're identified as this holy woman and the harlot, right? Which is real easy on our end of things to figure out which one's which. But of course, in reality, it's still kind of easy. But it is not as simple, right? And in fact, and this is the point in the Bible study where we're either going to get extremely derailed or we're going to finish early. One of the two. This is...
Wait, did the woman become a beast? The beast... Wasn't she sitting on it?
Yeah, so there are 2 beasts. So we have, in the interlude, we have 2 beasts identified. The first is this political beast, and the second is this...
So a prostitute sitting on a prostitute?
Prostitute sitting on the White House, which is not quite right. If we're going to be particular with the image, it's going to... I think it's covered in here. No, in the next section here. It's a prostitute sitting in Rome, basically.
Are they saying all politics are
No.
against? Okay.
This is not, it may feel that way sometimes, but no. By its nature, the state is not against God. In fact, we recognize that God uses the state and that there can be godly rulers, right? In fact, we want as many godly politicians as possible, right? But this political beast is how how Satan uses both the state and a corrupted state and a corrupted church for its own ends, right?
So he goes after really inherently good, powerful things and mirrors them in a duplicity, and then tries to use those against people to turn them away from the true God.
Yes.
Like overtly simplified.
Yeah. Yes. The one thing I'm going to kind of put in as a note here, just because I think it's important, is authority. This gets complicated, but authority is a God ordained thing, right? Fourth commandment enshrines it, right? In fact, even in the garden, there's a kind of authority, right? There's Adam over Eve, and Adam and Eve over the animals and the plants and the
God
right,
over them, yeah.
and God, right, and even in the divine taxonomy, right, we see that the Father is right, big mystery stuff, right, but the Father is first among the equals, almost, although Caesar kind of ruined that phrase. But the Son submits to the Father, and the Holy Spirit submits to both the Son and the Father. And so even within the perfected equality, Athanasian Creed stuff of the Trinity, we still see authority and order. And so, like, authority and order is a good thing. However, authority is very easy to be corrupted. Right, and this happens very quickly. Right, on its very face, the purpose of authority is for the benefit of those down the ladder, if you will. Right, so if you're going to draw a ladder of authority, those on the top, in God's order, are to serve those beneath. Right, Jesus talks about this all the time. The first shall become the last, and last become the first. Right, Jesus washes his disciples' feet. Right, I have come to serve. Right, that is how this is supposed to function, right? Within families, the heads of families are supposed to serve the younger and those under the authority. In the state, it is the authorities in the state that are supposed to serve those beneath them. However, humans are bad at this, to say the least, and often flip that on its head and say, "I am an authority; you now serve me." Right? You who are underneath me are there for my pleasure, right? For my benefit, right? Work is another example, right? In management, right? In God's order, the managers are supposed to serve the workers, right? That often doesn't happen. Right? And it often doesn't happen in families. It doesn't happen in the state. Point to earthly authority, and it often gets corrupted. Additionally, and kind of more to the direction that Revelation takes it, is, especially with politics, let's just say, generally speaking, politics, it is easy for politics to become a god in and of themselves, right? Politics becomes the thing that you fear, love, and trust in above all things, that you look to provide you for everything that you need to support this body in life, right? That is to say that politics and government and all of that kind of stuff can very easily usurp the position of God, right? This is a problem in Old Testament Israel. It is a problem in the Middle Ages. It's a problem today, right? You don't need to go far. And again, it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum that you are on. Both sides of our personal political spectrum have a tendency to deify the government in one, or politics, I should say, not the government, to deify politics in one way or another. And that is problematic. right? Pastors, at least the ones I've been around, get really, I think, irritating in election seasons, right? Because we keep saying things like, I don't care who wins, Jesus is still in control, right? That's the point. That we need to, I mean, especially as, it's baked into the American DNA. It just is. Not necessarily more so, but baked into the American DNA is this tendency to deify politics. Not necessarily the guy in the White House, not necessarily the people on Capitol Hill, but just politics in general.
Well, it's so weird because that's like the opposite of why it started.
Well, that is a rabbit hole I'm not going to go down. Because I was just replacing one for the other. But anyway.
Why Babylon? Why is she called Babylon?
Why Babylon? Is that in this section or are you jumping ahead of me? No. Okay. Why Babylon? What do you know about Babylon from the Bible, right?
Captivity, the exile of the Jews.
All right, so good. That's the big flashing light.
The seventh wonder of the world.
One of them, the Hanging Gardens, are there, right? But Babylon is, for much of the Old Testament, not all of it, but for much of it, Babylon is the boogeyman in the background that's coming to get the Israelites. And in fact, and what's worth noting, Old Testament history kind of stuff, is for fear of Babylon, the Israelites did a lot of really stupid things, like trusting in politics, right? When Sennacherib comes to the gates of Jerusalem, what does he accuse Hezekiah and the people of Jerusalem? Sennacherib's an Assyrian, but it applies. What does he accuse them of? Do you remember? He says, he says, don't trust your God. I just killed everyone that's under your God's control up north. And I've killed every other people that are protected by every other God. So your God's toast. Don't worry about that. Your God can't help you. That's one. But the thing he spends more time on is, you think Egypt's going to help you? Egypt's a broken reed, right? Lean on it and it'll pierce your hand. That's Sennacherib. Sennacherib spends most of his time outside of you're going to eat your dung kind of talk, attacking Jerusalem, the city, for looking to Egypt to help them. And that's what Hezekiah was doing. That's what most of the kings of Judah and Israel were doing. They were getting into these military alliances. And that's one of the things that the prophets are constantly telling the kings of Israel and Judah to quit it. Stop thinking that you can solve these problems on your own by making an alliance with Egypt and Babylon and Assyria. Basically, if there's a people group in the Levant in the Old Testament time frame, the Israelites were allied with them at one point or the other to stop either the Assyrians or the Babylonians, and it did not work. Because the Israelites were trusting in their politics to protect them. They said, Babylon, Assyria, they're the big scary guys, so we need to get Egypt on our side. We need to go get the Edomites on our side to stop them. Because there's nothing else that can stop the Babylonians. Right? Even so far as some of the prophets start talking about how God, to destroy this idolatry, says, okay, I'm going to use Babylon to smash all of you to show you that ain't going to work. Right? And so Babylon is this big evil boogeyman. It's where evil comes from. It's where idolatry comes from. At least, I mean, it's not the only place, but it's one of these places, especially in the intertestamental mind. It is the seat of evil and debauchery and the destruction of God's people. That's just kind of all wrapped up into one. The people of this day thought of Babylon in much the same way that I think, less nowadays, but certainly a few decades ago, thought of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? By the way, the big thing about Sodom and Gomorrah didn't come into the cultural mind's eye until like the Puritan era. I mean, obviously people knew about it. What was that?
Which was the Puritan era?
This is like Mayflower and the founding of America. That's when a couple of guys started, coined the term sodomy.
1600s?
Yeah, coined the term sodomy and that kind of thing to using these cities, right?
So Sodom and Gomorrah came first, then Babylon?
Oh, Sodom and Gomorrah are early in Genesis. Babylon comes
So they
much
called her Babylon like I'd be like, that whore, her name's Las Vegas.
You're right, yeah. So you can also, Las Vegas is not as bad, or since we're just picking on your city,
I can't think of
New
it.
Orleans,
It was either
right?
that or Memphis. I can't think of it.
Yeah. So, but that
Atlanta. Her name's Atlanta.
the people of the first century Christians would have thought of Babylon in much the same way, like I said, that we in our culture kind of use the term Sodom or maybe Vegas or whatever. These are just sin, right? Well, Sin City, right? That works. These are just sinful hubs of debauchery. Now they're no worse than anywhere else, as we talked about last week with New Orleans.
But Babylon truly was the pit of, like, the epicenter of some bad stuff going on.
Well, I mean, yeah, it was the capital city, the people that destroyed the Israelites. It's the one that took them into exile. Although that was all under God's direction, and there was a massive hub of idolatry there. I mean, that's that is definitely true. But quite frankly, for most of the Old Testament, it wasn't Babylonian gods that were tempting the Israelites, right? You have like the Philistine people groups and Phoenician people group gods like Baal and Ashtoreth, and later you get gods like Dagon, which are Assyrian. But Babylon was a cultural touchstone of that day. That's where all the evil people, the devil worship, idolaters are from there.
Okay. And then we read in 1715, what was that? That he sat her above many waters, and they're saying the many waters represent peoples from what I'm reading here. The peoples and crowds and nations and tongues. Why did God choose her to sit out? I'm lost.
All right. Well, we're not at 15 yet, so that might be part of it.
Okay.
The prostitute is. So Kathy, the prostitute is false religion.
Yeah.
And Babylon is, again, we're just reinforcing that image. Babylon is false religion. Where in the world can you go and not find false religion?
Nowhere.
Basically nowhere, right? And so to say that, there's false religion all over the place, or even religion masquerading as the church, pretending to be the church.
So what is false religion? Is it everything but the Lutheran faith?
No. Close. But not quite. It's everything but the Christian faith.
So Jesus.
Yes.
If you ain't down with Jesus, you're a whore. You're a whore and a beast.
The short answer is yes, but we do need to be careful because we recognize that the harlot is pretending to be the church. All right, here it is. There are a lot of groups out there that use the name Jesus that are or wolves in sheep's clothing.
Like
right?
who?
Well, I'm not going to name people.
I will. The Mormons.
Okay, good. That's not what I was going for. Okay, so that's actually nicer, right? Yeah. Universalists, the Jehovah's Witnesses, right? Okay, good. That's not who I was going to name, but that's a little less. Anyway, yeah. Anyone who.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if we go back to our heresies class, right, the Arians would have fallen under this category. If we remember John in his epistles, he's dealing with Antichrist, right, false teachers, right, and so they would fall under this category, right. And this is probably a helpful way to kind of push us forward, right. We don't look for we're not looking for the great harlot, right. I'm sure people have tried. But that's not what we're doing. That's not what this is. The harlot is false faith of every kind, but most poignantly, right? So here, Well, we'll look to verse 6 for this. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus, right? So she's drunk on the martyrs, but she's also drinking in, right, the blood of their witness, right? She's pretending to be the church, right? And that's what makes this final form of this religious beast, this harlot, so insidious, is that she pretends to be the church. I've been recommending tremendous music to you, so I'm going to do one more. There was a single by a band that came out not too long ago that I absolutely love. Mostly the single. The band's okay. Magnus likes this band a lot. The band is called Ghost, which you don't need to listen to most of their stuff. Their shtick is kind of poking fun at Christianity in general. But they have a song that they recently came out with called Jesus, He Knows Me. And the chorus goes, Jesus, He knows me, He knows I'm right. Jesus, He knows me. Go listen to that song, listen to the words. It is a piercing, and I think all too accurate accusation. The Ghost, this band, has recognized that not all the Christians, recognize something that not all Christians have. They have seen the prostitute, to use our imagery, and said, this, like, we're going to make fun of Christianity, but this clearly isn't it, right? So we're going to make fun of that even more, right? It's a very catchy song. You'll be singing it. I was whistling it all day today, but because it came to mind.
So it's a satirical song.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
All right.
But so it's this
Weaponized
idea.
Jesus.
Yeah. No. And
Yeah.
and I mean we can see this throughout history, right? People who take Christianity in general, right? Who we see events where evil forces dress up as the church and they lead people astray. Sometimes they might not know what they are doing, right? I'll leave that out for some of
Devil's
them.
MO is to hide and
Oh, absolutely, right?
hide the lies inside the truth. And
Oh, absolutely, right? So, and this is just a general thing that I think is helpful when we talk about spiritual warfare in general. What's the devil's goal?
get
And
you
we're
away
talking
from
about
God.
Take us away from Christ.
Right, it is not to get you to worship him. Devil doesn't care if you worship him or not. That is not, and in fact, I think nowadays that the devil doesn't even try that most of the time. Sometimes he does, right? Most of what the best thing that the devil can do is to get you here, thinking you are here, right? And we talk about this with the Pharisees in the Gospels, right? The Pharisees are the holy people. They're the ones who have it all together, and everyone knows it except for Jesus, right? And who is it that's willing to talk to Jesus? Most of the time, not always. The prostitutes, right? Right? The prostitutes and the tax collectors, right? So not only do we have prostitutes, but we have people at the IRS that are willing to talk to Jesus. Why? They know they're not here. They're very aware of it. But the Pharisees, who aren't here either, and that's the point of a lot of Jesus' parables against the Pharisees, is, right, you're not in either, dude, right? And then you have those great lines. They perceived this parable was against them. It's like, well, he used your name in it. So, but, right, this is what Jesus is trying to do with the Pharisees. And no, Jesus keeps talking to Pharisees, right? He keeps trying to bring them back. And he brings, we know at least Nicodemus, right? He's the big famous one. Nicodemus is a Pharisee. And he was also one of the first believers, right? And so, it's not like once you're here, you're lost. But the ideal place for you to be in the eyes of the devil is thinking you are in church. Is thinking you are in the one true religion, right?
Thinking you got it right when you don't.
Yeah, and I mean, how many of these epistles that I've taught you are the authors constantly saying, pay attention, be careful about this kind of stuff, test what people are saying against the words of Scripture, right?
Basically all they're saying here.
It's a pretty major theme. I've run out of I'm going to the Old Testament for my next class because if I teach you another epistle, I don't know how to say, pay attention, take this seriously in any different ways. Right? I need to take a break for a little while. And I'll be honest, it wasn't until I taught this that I really realized how much this is just a consistent and constant theme in the epistles. It's not in all of them, but in a lot of them. And it's not the whole point, but for a number of them, the whole point is pay attention.
That makes sense because that's the advice I'd give a child.
That's what Jesus said.
Just watch out.
Right,
Careful.
watch.
Pay attention.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, a historic example would be the Puritan church during the Salem witch trials.
Right, yeah, they
was killing, was executing people. They thought they were doing the will of God, but they were off.
right, yeah. I mean, they
standing on rye.
yeah, well, there's all sorts of, but you don't have to go to those witch trials, right? You know, all sorts of. Oh, absolutely, right. Does anyone know the catchphrase of the Crusades? By the way, you're about to get a lot more crusading and crusade metaphors because I've caught up on the Timmer podcast and I've started the Crusades podcast. So get ready. You know what the theme, not the theme, the catchphrase of the Crusades was? Deus vult. God wills it. Oh, he didn't. Right. With 700 years plus of context, God did not will that. But that's what every crusader was chanting on their way to the Holy Land.
Of course they were.
Right? God wills it, right? It's real easy. It is very easy. We need to be very, very careful, right? And just, I mentioned Ghost and Jesus, He Knows Me, so it's probably worth mentioning a little bit more rigorous version of a similar thing. There's a guy on YouTube. He is a Lutheran, although he's not an LCMS guy, but we are ultra in pulpit. He's AALC.
What does that mean?
He's American Association of Lutheran Churches. It means that they agree with us about most things, but they don't like our politics. And I don't mean like national politics. They don't like synod. That's the very short version I've got. We have a pastor of an AALC, I say an AALC congregation, but he's a prison chaplain who is in our circuit, comes to our meetings. Great guy. Anyway, this guy online, his name's Chris Roseborough. He's a pastor out in the middle of nowhere, North Dakota, so he spends most of his time making YouTube videos. But he's had a podcast for forever.
What's his channel called?
Fighting for the Faith.
I watch him regularly.
Yeah, and he does good work. And I don't agree with everything he says.
Yeah.
Well, let me rephrase that. I don't agree with everything he says. I also don't agree with a lot of the ways he says things. He has a real problem with ad hominem.
Yeah,
but
he had that whole thing about it, the whole show.
Yeah, and he was accusing other people of ad hominem, but it was really a pot kettle. So anyway, that's the
I stopped
know,
watching it after that one. Sorry.
No, you're good. But the whole purpose of that ministry that he does is looking for the harlot, basically. And that's not how he phrases it ever. He phrases it as comparing what people say in the name of God to the Word of God. Right? His whole purpose is let's look for the wolves in sheep's clothing. Let's see if, and it's usually gigantic churches, not all of them, right? But it's usually these gigantic churches that have pastors who. Right, the one guy I'm very happy to call is like Joel Osteen. Right? Oof, that's a problem, right? That's by the way, Jesus, He Knows Me, straight up about Joel Osteen. And other guys, but it's him. It's this wolves in sheep clothing sort of thing. It's this prostitutes, this the false church, the anti-church, as Brighton does phrase in his excursus there, which I think is a really helpful way to think of the harlot, right? If we think of Satan as this antichrist figure of that which fights it, right? So Satan is, how did you put it? Satan is a dragon wearing a Jesus costume, wearing a God costume. That's why he has all the horns and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. The religious beast is Satan wearing a church costume. And that's something we need to be extremely careful about.
A hoarder home in a really nice neighborhood.
What was that?
A hoarder's home in a nice neighborhood.
Right. Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
Going back,
Yes.
if Babylon is considered the center of evil.
Mm-hmm.
That's why she's sitting over many waters.
No. So Babylon is an image, right? So let me phrase it this way. We're going to do, this is there's a name for it. If I told you to imagine the image of a man wearing a red suit with a tail and wings and pointy horns, who am I talking about?
Satan.
Right, I'm talking about the devil, right? You just have that image, right? Or if I say, think of an extremely handsome, well-dressed man, Middle Ages, and he's got a fiddle in the middle of Georgia somewhere, right? Who am I talking about? I'm talking about the devil, right? And we have these images that conjure up an association, right? Is the devil a well-dressed man in Georgia with a fiddle? No. Does the devil have a red tail and horns? No. Right? It's not what it is, right? Babylon then is the same thing, right? Babylon is what John is painting on a greeting card to get you to think about something, right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They're just like a big pagan, not religious society, but all the money and all the garments and all the entertainment and all the the big hub of the world back then.
Yeah.
For like secular, sinful paradise, so to speak.
Right, and
There's
then
no time.
yes,
You don't have time
and
for
just
that.
as thank you, Mark, and just as John is not telling us to look for a prostitute riding this weird-looking red beast thing that's crawling out of the water, right, with a cup of blood she gets drunk on, right? We are not looking for that. That will not happen. Babylon is not. We're not looking for the literal Babylon. You can go to Babylon. But that's not what John is
It's
seeing.
a club in Montreal, a gay club.
Oh, well, why is it, right? But we got a similar image, but it's being taken in a different direction, right? So Babylon is just this image of a sinful, false religion place, right? And so to say, we could say that, I'm trying to think of a good way to... See, I have a very good cultural touchstone, but none of you are on TikTok except for Katie. And so Katie's the only one who would get the reference.
Is it a person on TikTok?
No, it's the Roman Empire thing, right? My Roman Empire.
Oh, yeah. Salem Witch Trials is the ladies' Roman Empire.
Yeah, right. See, I told you she would know exactly what I'm talking about.
It's burned into my phone screen.
Yeah. So, I don't, I'm guessing here, but I'm trying because I'm not a baseball guy, right? But we got the Field of Dreams, right? No, we're going to do... Okay, Mecca. What is Mecca? Forget Field of Dreams. Mecca.
It's the holy city for Islam.
Yes, and what is important culturally about Mecca?
There's a wall.
Aren't you supposed to take a pilgrimage?
There it is. You got to take your pilgrimage to Mecca, right? They're Hajj to be particular. Anyway, you have to take your pilgrimage to Mecca, right? And so this is why Field of Dreams connected with me, because Field of Dreams, that baseball field, is Kenny Lotz' Mecca, right? He has to take the pilgrimage there, right? And he did a little while back, right? So it's okay, right? But so you might say, oh well, this is my Mecca, right? What we mean by that is this is a very important place to me that I need to travel to have an experience that will affect me deeply, right? It has nothing to do with keeping Islamic law, right? Kenny was not, also Kenny's never said, I'm going to my Mecca, right? This is...
Did he go to where they filmed it?
Yeah, he went to like the actual field.
Okay.
Kenny's huge into baseball if you don't know anything about it.
He's a huge Kevin Costner fan.
Right. But like we can talk this way, right? So I mean, if you have somewhere that you're, like somewhere that you're really passionate about that you want to go visit, right? That could be your Mecca, right? Babylon is being used the same way, right? So like Mecca is a real place. You can go to that city, but when someone uses this turn of phrase, which isn't that common, of, I'm going to my Mecca, they're not going to Saudi Arabia, right? In the same way, this image of Babylon the Great is, right? Babylon's not a pilgrimage destination. Babylon is evil and wicked, right? And it's where all false religions come from. And so to say, so for instance, you could go somewhere in the world, right, just to get your many waters, nations, peoples thing, right? You can go anywhere in the world and you can say, oh, what a Babylon this is, right? Or you can go to Houston, to Joel Osteen's church, and say, Babylon, right? Or whatever it is. Or, you can go to Salt Lake City and say, Babylon, right?
Luther said Rome. Babylon.
Well, yeah. Rome was Luther's. Rome was Luther's Babylon. In fact, he directly uses that image. So it's a metaphor, right? It's an image, and that image is wickedness and false religion and striving against God. Does that make sense?
Are you saying anywhere you go, there's going to be a bad place?
Well, yes, kind of. Babylons exist everywhere, right? So false religion and wickedness and human sin and striving against God, that happens everywhere, right?
Even here, yeah.
Yeah, right, and that's where repentance comes in. But we need to be wary of those, or of that, wherever it may be. Right? I mean, maybe your Babylon, and I use this example a lot, so it's probably my Babylon, is traffic, right? And all those idiots that don't know how to drive, right? Right? This is the source of evil and wickedness in you, right? And all of a sudden, right? Whatever.
No, because traffic makes me pray a lot, so it actually gets me.
Well, there you go. So it's your Mecca, right? No. There was that song a while ago about a girl who likes driving, and it's my church, right? And,
Yeah.
well, I guess that's my church. You'll know that. I don't know. It's country. I don't know. I think it's country. I don't know. It's not metal, so I don't know. So let's read more of the Bible. Since we haven't gotten very far, but we've covered most of the material. So let's see. It wants us to do 7 through 18. That's the rest of the chapter. Let's go through 14. So 7 through 14. Do I have a volunteer?
I guess I'll read it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Except I can't find 7, so maybe there isn't a 7.
It's like at the end of the first line. Yeah.
When I saw her, I marveled greatly. But the angel said to me, why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman, and of the beast, the 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was, and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the dwellers on earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. They are also 7 kings, 5 of them whom have fallen. One is the other has not yet come, and when he does come, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast, what was and is not and is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7. And goes to destruction. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour, together with the beast. These are one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is the Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called and chosen and faithful.
Well, I think I understood that whole thing.
I know, that is a mess of a paragraph.
No, I understood it.
Oh, look at you.
I got it. I understand what's going on now. Cool. cool. That's cool. It's like learning a new language.
Yeah. I'm actually, for this, I think the note on Revelation 7, 9 to 11 in your guide is very helpful. So I'm just going to read it. I only read stuff straight to you when I think it's useful. So Revelation 7, 9 through 11 in your notes in the student guide. John and all the readers of Revelation during the 1st and 2nd centuries certainly knew that the 7 hills pointed to the city of Rome. Do you know why? Right? Rome was founded on 7 hills. Rome is sometimes called the city of the 7 hills. I mean, if I were better at Roman history, I would know all of them, but I know the Capitoline Hill.
So
That's
it
the
belongs
big
to this earthly,
yeah.
brief earthly plane.
Right. So throughout the centuries since the writing of Revelation, commentators have attempted to identify these 7 kings. For the most part, Roman emperors have been matched with the 7 kings, but not always the same emperors. However, these kings only serve as models or types of all such earthly rulers. All oppressive earthly rulers that come and go throughout the entire period of time covered by the prophetic message of Revelation are symbolized by these 7 kings as well as by the beast itself. The number 7 is symbolic and represents all earthly powers and rulers who claim spiritual authority by which they justify and sanction their despotic dominion over their subjects, in particular as it is used in opposition to the Church of Christ.
Where is that? Where are we?
We are...
84.
Thank you.
84 and 85.
84 and 85. For me, it's page 113. So that is something I should have mentioned to Ken. Having the student numbers on here would have been useful.
So we read those 2 paragraphs at the bottom of the page.
One big paragraph. It's on bullet point 7, 9 to 11. It might be 2 paragraphs for you. It's one for me.
No.
Never mind. It's on the second. It goes. Okay.
You said it is 2 paragraphs, or it is not?
No, it's
just the
one.
one. Okay.
But it's on 2 different pages.
Right. So, again, and it's so tempting to do it here, especially because you do have a fairly clear reference to Rome. Say, ooh, let's figure out who these emperors are. And by the way, if you can do it, that'll really help you date the book of Revelation. Because if you can get the 6th one is still alive, right? When John wrote this.
Were they talking? Oh, so they were talking about real people.
Yes, in a general sense, right? And so I think Brighton's helpful here, right? What these kings are all earthly authorities that oppose the church directly, indirectly, whatever it is. And I think, for me personally, I have more interest in that description, who was, is not, and will be. Is that what it was?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
It was
I thought that meant like prophets. Like there's only 2 that are right. One's Jesus, he's already come, and then he'll come again eventually.
No, so this is actually in opposition to how Christ has been described in the book, right? Remember, Jesus was and is to come, right? And so we see, right, that is Christ. He is the one who truly is, and we have these false gods wearing the god suits who were and are not and will continue to be, right? So they're in opposition. They're not quite God, but they're going to put themselves in that position. And again, you can try and overlay kings and rulers and emperors and authorities and whatever you want onto these group of 7 and this group of 10, but I think it's more helpful, right? If you've been with me for the rest of the book where numbers are symbolic, especially the numbers 7 and 10, then they're probably symbolic here too, right? This is kind of a general, here's a $10 word, hermeneutical principle, is that typically authors use things in the same way throughout the same book. It's not always true, but it's a good rule of thumb. So it would be strange if throughout the whole book of Revelation, John has been speaking, or this vision that comes to us through John has been in general, metaphorical images, and now all of a sudden it's a direct one-for-one overlay onto earthly kingdoms, earthly rulers. Is it possible? Maybe. Are you going to figure out who it is? Probably not. So it's
I
not.
don't think it matters.
Right, and then that's the point. It doesn't matter who it
Because they're
is.
basically, aren't they telling you, like, they don't, they're, like, these people, they're brief, they're fleeting, they're going to enter destruction, they're not important, they're going around with weird beasts and boars on their backs. Like, basically, like, these kings are just people, they're shitty people,
Yeah.
and they're, you know, part of that falseness that you're not supposed to go into, like the religious beast, the political
Yeah.
beast. They're part of that systematic devil thing.
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the ways, right, that just comes to my mind that we can take this, there were 5, there's 1 now, there's another one coming, and then there's going to be 10 more. We can say, in the
There are
past...
really people that sit
Right.
there and try to figure out
Oh,
why.
absolutely.
Why?
In the past, there were a ton of people who did this. Right now, there are people doing this. In the near future, there are going to be people doing this. And if we keep going into the distant future, unless Jesus returns, there's going to be a lot of people doing this, right? Trying to usurp God's authority, to fight against the church, to struggle against the church, try and take the place of the church, all of that. I think that's a better, more consistent with the rest of the book way of looking at kind of what's going on here, rather than trying to say, oh, well, the first 5 are like Caesar through Nero or whatever it is. It's been a while since I listened to the History of Rome podcast. And then we got Nero, and now that last one's Diocletian or something. It's like, oh, maybe. But
It's audio.
it is adiaphora, but one of the dangers of doing that, which is kind of something we've gone through with the whole book, is if we say, oh, well, these are Roman emperors. Well, Rome's not around anymore. I don't need to worry about this part, right? This isn't for me. One of the dangers of saying, well, none of these guys have come yet is, well, they're in the future, so that doesn't bother me, right? And so what we want to do is, and it's uncomfortable, but what we want to do throughout the whole book of Revelation is kind of sit in it and recognize that this is around us, that we're in the middle of this, right? Time is short. Jesus is coming soon, right? That's one of these
Watch
things.
and pray.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't be caught asleep. I mean, that was last week that we covered that in brief. And that's one of the things that Revelation is trying to push on us. This isn't something in the distant past. This isn't something in the distant future. You are dealing with this right now. And so to kind of stay awake, be watchful, be prepared, all of that kind of stuff. Right? Pay attention. You don't want to fall for the traps. Right? And it's not like, oh, well, the only ones who are doing this were those Roman emperors or these 7 popes or whoever it may be. No, and so I don't need to worry about it, right? No, you're not on your guard anymore, so pay attention. All right, good. Let us carry on and just get the rest of this chapter done. Volunteer to read the conclusion of the chapter.
Let's start at what?
15.
And the angel said to me, the waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. And the 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put into their hearts to carry out the purpose by being of one mind and handing over the royal power of the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth.
All right, so what we see in the conclusion here is that the woman and the beast are not friends, right? The beast destroys the woman, right? Devours her, burns her up, right?
No wonder we're thieves.
Yeah, oh yeah, right? And I think we can see these kinds of things in the world around us. Now, an example of this sort of thing happening that came to my mind, again, remember, this is the kind of thing that's happening all the time. This is technically a Crusades reference, but I'm at the beginning of the podcast, and this happens at the end of the Crusades, right? This is where that national treasure thing comes from, right? The King of France has allied himself with the Teutonic Order, right? really simple version of it. Let's just say the King of France is the political beast, and the Templars, did I say Teutonic? The Templars. Teutonics are Germans, and they're fighting Russians, or the people who would become Russians, the Novgorodians at this point. But the Templars they're a religious group, right? So we'll give them that false religion stamp. Although neither of them quite fit it, but whatever, right? Well, as soon as the King of France realizes that he has no money and has not had money for a long time, and he owes a lot of people a lot of money, what does he do? It's like, you Templars, you the ones that have been propping me up from a religious standpoint, which they had been doing. It's complicated. He says, turns out you're all heretics who have been worshiping Satan and like peeing on crosses and stuff. I'm going to burn you all alive, and then I'm just going to go check out your treasuries. I'm just going to go see what's there, right? And then there's nothing there. Right, and there's like 8 Templars who made it out, and of course they took all their gold with them, which, as we discussed on Sunday, the Templar treasure was credit. It was not actual giant piles of gold. But you have these kind of 2 institutions, both of them very corrupt. Let's keep it simple. One political and one religious in nature, and they turn on each other. Right? I use the Templars and the French king are not the first one that came to my mind, but the other ones are more modern, and so I'm not going to use them, right? This sort of thing happens throughout history all over the place, right? Where corruption in the religious sphere and corruption in the political sphere, they eat each other alive, right? Or they try to, right? And so this is part of their destruction. Right? Because remember, the beast and the harlot, they lose this whole thing, right? Chapter 18, which we're not going to get to.
They even with each other.
Right? Yeah, right? they used each other while they could for their evil purpose, and then they destroy each other, and God destroys them. That's, by the way, what chapter 18 is about, is that it's a very poetic, it's a song almost. Some people have made it into a song, but I'm going to stop referencing that. And about the overthrow, the destruction of the prostitute, of the beast, of Babylon, and of all those who are the false religion, this political beast oppressing the saints of God, and how they're destroyed and overthrown, right, in their judgment. We get a picture of that in the end of the last section, right, verse 14. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them. For he is the Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with whom are called chosen and faithful. That's you, right? So we are oppressed by the beast and the harlot, but we will overcome because Christ fights for us. All right. We only did 17, so we didn't do any of 18, but that's okay. Like I said, 18 is mostly covering just the overthrow. Feel free to read it. If you have any questions, you can ask me next week, and we'll go over that. Reading for next week, if you want to get ahead, is chapter 19 through 2020. Which can't be right, because 20 doesn't have 20 verses. So that's a typo. Well, I don't know. I'm going to look at the
2010 in ours on page 88.
Yeah, on yours it also says through 20 verse 10. So, if you don't believe me, the pericope, I'm going to leave it open here to let you know I'm not crazy. The pericope selection says 20 verse 20, which does not exist. So, basically 19 and 20 is going to be next week.
But she's right, it does say 2010 here.
Right, and it does, your next student copy does also say 2010.
It stops right before the Great White Throne Judgment.
Right.
Yes.
So, yeah, and then we are nearing the end, right? There's only 22 chapters, so we are getting close to the conclusion. Let's see, I think there's only 11 lessons. Next week is 9, and we're combining 10 and 11. So I guess we only have 2 more weeks. It's getting that close. Oh my goodness. Right.
I'll have been here 2 years.
All right.
Where you going now?
Last minute stuff before we close with the Lord's Prayer. All right, let's pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory,